physics becomes really surprising and conceptually revolutionary.
There's a completely different way to do computation.
Quantum computing is the only thing that fundamentally changes the rules of computation.
And it was always supposed to be 5 years off or 10 years off. And I thought quantum computing might be like that. I don't now.
It's clear that sooner rather than later, we're going to have quantum computers.
We have seen evolutions of technology. Now we're about to see a revolution.
But every new technology has consequences.
Scientists say it's the technology that could revolutionize computing.
There is absolutely a geopolitical arms race on
between companies and nations.
National governments, the number one reasons that they're behind this is national security. China, the numbers are off the charts on what they're investing in it.
There's a reason to fear getting behind in quantum, so you have to participate in that race. You don't have a choice.
How do we think about what's actually going on?
What can I do when I have the quantum computers? How can I change the world by designing new chemicals, new materials?
But you do have to be willing to take some chances and accept failure.
It would be much easier to build a spaceship to fly to Mars. But building the quantum computer is more exciting.
Quantum's going to be the world that we live in.
We're going to be able to simulate so much chemistry and so much physics that we cannot simulate today. Things like clean energy, cleaner batteries for electric cars.
They have this tool, and now they're going at light speed, and they're doing things that they never even considered were possible.
We're doing this. We are solving problems today.
We're not going to be told what to do by the suits, and we don't care what anyone else thinks. That's what quantum is today.
And kind of satisfies the need to explore the world.
We haven't even started to scratch the surface about what these machines can do.
I'm Kerry Sanders. Thank you very much. Just a little background. I spent 30 plus years at NBC News covering the world, 40 years as a television journalist, and one day at NBC News, this kid wandered into our office, 19 years old, and needless to say, nobody wanted to give him the time of day, but he had seemingly a unique ability to look at the way our technology was working and really run with it almost immediately, and understood the world that we lived in, which is a deadline. And so I've got a couple pictures here of this young man, again, very young. He joins us, and we didn't really want to necessarily trust him, but he earned our trust very quickly, taught us a lesson. Matt Cimaglia, who has gone from the earliest days of doing television news under incredible deadline, proving to a bunch of old people that he knew a lot more about what was going on technically than even the technicians and the engineers at NBC, to where he is today, which is at Quantum Coast Capital. So we're going to welcome Matt Cimaglia out here to answer some questions and talk for us. Yeah. There we go. So, obviously, we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
19-year-old who had just come out of college, so that in itself was kind of amazing. You wander in, and I'm sort of curious from where you started in doing this television thing and storytelling to where you are today. Did you see this arc unfolding?
Well, what was interesting when I even started at NBC is I wasn't even sure if I wanted to get into production. I thought I wanted to go into technology. And there was a light bulb moment that went off during that time period where I thought, well, why not just blend the two? And it was at an inflection point for the network where we were literally still analog at that time period. So there were people within the network that came to me, and we were sort of the prototype of that here in Miami. But it was, how do we leverage digital technology to edit?
And the idea was that you're moving a train to a different track at 100 miles an hour. Because the system was set up on analog, to go over to digital, it might sound like it's the flip of a switch, but it was not.
No, I mean, it took almost 5 years to convert the network from analog to digital during this time period. And for me, it was exciting because I was in my early 20s. I was traveling the world on NBC's dime and getting to see a lot. But it was more incredible to see some of the processes and the technology that we were looking at that time period and how it really shifted to where we're now able to enjoy that today.
So we covered a lot of stories together, some dramatic ones like hurricanes. We did some fun ones about people who thought buildings were haunted and whether you could actually capture something like that on camera. But did you see this storytelling and the technology that you were engaged with leading you to where you are now in quantum?
I think because I've always been sort of a natural storyteller, in order to explain to anyone, even at the network at time periods, or even my mom when I was a kid, on why I needed a specific part for my computer, I had to evolve and figure out how to explain why, and why that piece of technology or how it was going to shift something that I was currently doing and make it better. And when I started looking into quantum, quantum has a communications problem. And a lot of people I've heard in this room, even in the last 24 hours, have said, well, I think quantum might be 5 or 10 years still away. It's not something that's reality. And I've been really making it a mission for myself to go out and communicate to the world that quantum is not only happening now, it's been happening all around us.
Okay, so let's bring it down a little bit and speak in a way that I and others who are not where you are can understand quantum. I mean, what is it? Tell me that in English.
So right now, it's sort of, there's a lot of different aspects to quantum. So I would stress that, and we heard Nicolo talk about that this morning, but there's a lot of different aspects in the sense that there's quantum sensing and quantum networking. Those are probably the two underspoken about areas of quantum. And these have been around for a lot longer than we're seeing even the hardware power of the compute power today. Then we have quantum security, and this is an area where we're talking about quantum key distribution or post-quantum encryption, where it will be the replacement of what we're currently using on our encryption methods today.
So you're talking about things like my phone when it says, get your secondary response with a phone number or a key code, and I have to put it in. All of that will relatively become useless because quantum can break that encryption?
Yeah. So there's these true random key number generators that are going to be able to be available on quantum computers. They're out there now. Mm-hmm. Actually, somebody from IonQ invented that or helped invent that. But when we look at current day encryption, I would say what we're about to experience, not in 5 or 10 years, but in a more concentrated effort, things will have to move at a very fast pace in order for us to constantly be ahead.
And are we talking about like quantum is coming? Why is there this energy right now for quantum? Is there something happening right now as opposed to in 5 or 10 years we will see X, Y, and Z?
There's this really great investment firm that's pushing things now. So I would say that collectively the technology is now better, obviously, than it's ever been. That's just natural evolution of technology. We all have witnessed that in our lifetimes. When we look at quantum in general, there has been so much government funding, so much support from national labs, so much support from universities where they've been doing this work for decades. And now it's coming out of that lab and it's coming into the mainstream.
And so if now is the moment, and when something is now in the moment, you have the challenge of what is real and what is hype, and hype can sometimes overwhelm, and when there's too much hype, it kind of steals the message of what is real. So let's just take an example of encryption. What is it that the threat that comes from quantum when it comes to encryption, and quite frankly, the data that I think is secure today?
So there's a theory out there, it's very similar to Y2K, and it talks about Q-Day. And this premise behind Q-Day is the day that one of our adversaries is going to be able to decrypt information that they've been storing. So there's a lot of store now, decrypt later.
So it's been stolen.
We know that's happening. Okay. I mean, I'm sure we've even done it to some degree.
And we like to believe that nobody can get into it because it's locked.
Correct. And I also often talk about the fact that history repeats itself. So if we go back to World War II, there was this thing called the Enigma machine. And the Enigma machine was, in that era, the highest form of encryption you could possibly ever imagine. And then this guy, Alan Turing, comes along and he invents a computer that decrypts the Enigma machine and arguably saves the war by multiple years and, God knows how many millions of soldiers. And this is a time period where I just imagine the next Enigma machine about to be decrypted, and I don't think that they're going to tell us when they do it.
So if we are at that moment, maybe right now, and we don't know it, give me the quantum is good as opposed to quantum is bad.
So I look at quantum in a bunch of different ways. I live in South Florida. There's this thing called traffic. It's not just prone to South Florida, but I will say that it is a result of the rapid expansion that has happened in the great state that we're in.
Everybody here knows it. They were stuck in it.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I would say is traffic optimization. So that's an example of how it might just have a first touch point on our lives. There are companies out there that are doing this with several governments. Another aspect is personalized medicine. And I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow, but I would say within certainly our lifetimes, there will be a time period where we're going to go to a clinic or a hospital or some sort of sensor is going to come and detect a cough that we have. And maybe a couple minutes later, somebody says, hey, we invented a new drug just for you based on your DNA. And it's now available at the newly formed CVS or something along those lines that cobbled this whole thing together with certain mixtures of antidotes.
So do we have a technology today that is using quantum and we're just unaware?
I would say GPS. I mean, you're going to hear about this in the next panel a little bit more, but when we look at atomic clocks, that is a pure form of quantum.
We remember hearing about the digital divide, and now I'm beginning to see more of this term of the quantum divide, not so much based on neighborhoods, the way the digital divide was, but more countries. First of all, is there a quantum divide? And if there is, we have people in here from various parts of the world, where does the United States figure into this, and who is the threat that is beyond us?
So somebody here in the audience says this all the time, and I'm stealing his quote, but there is no second in quantum. So think about that for a second, right? We can't be second. And when I say we, I'm saying the collective we. So there are people from many allied countries in this audience today. We collectively cannot be second. And when we look at China or Russia and the advances in the infrastructure and the investment that they're making, I remember last year there was an article that came out that said that they had broken some form of encryption. Total propaganda, and it was just a big, puff piece on, I think, the first shot across the bow. I think it was a way of feeling out what the public reaction would be if this were to actually happen. And then I really want to stress getting into the fact that, the Trump administration, first time around, signed the Quantum Initiative Act. We're now lapsed on that. We're waiting for Congress to get back and get to action on reauthorizing the new Quantum Initiative Act that will massively put dollars into our communities and into our government on advancing quantum technology in a very significant way.
And you do get a chance to go to Washington. You've met and spoken to these policy makers. What is the hurdle? What is the rub?
I think first and foremost, unfortunately, it's education. A lot of
understanding
quantum. Yeah, and again, everyone got hit by surprise when ChatGPT moment happened. And I'm using air quotes there because AI has been around for decades. There have been various forms of AI that we've all been using for a long time. it wasn't until ChatGPT came out and it was something that we were able to easily understand, easily interact with. There was no learning curve to it because we've been texting all along and it was almost just another form of text message. It was just an instant response instead of waiting for somebody to respond hours later. And because of that, there was a huge pushback in the government on saying, wait a second, this seems like witchcraft here. We need to pause. We need to pause innovation. And they even told a lot of the AI companies, hey, we don't want you to release the next version of this until we get a better handle on what AI is progressing right now. And we've seen a massive shift in our society, in the world, in the last 2 years as a result of AI. And what needs to be happening right now in Congress, because we're seeing the train coming. It's unavoidable at this point. We joked about earlier electricity. Electricity was another invention, all but 100 years ago that people were thinking, this cannot be. We can't allow this to happen into society. And look at what we're doing today with electricity. We're now in that moment again at another inflection point where we have to understand what the playbook was from the past, learn from it, and not hold back innovation, but embrace it a lot more, but understand what we're going to be doing with it.
So you go to Washington and you meet with members of Congress, and if we do the average age in the Senate, they're not even sure really
I'm the younger guy in the room.
Okay, exactly. And look, I'm on Medicare now. They're much older than me, okay? So how do you encourage them to see a future that is, in many ways, kind of blurry and hard to grasp? I mean, quantum is a word, but to them, it doesn't really have anything tangible. And to talk about someday it may provide the answer to a medicine that stops cancer, I can guarantee that they've heard someday something every day is going to be just around the corner.
Mm-hmm. It's difficult because that is one of the issues of quantum or other incredible technologies that are around the corner is they always seemingly are 5 to 10 years away. Again, going back to what I was referring to before about quantum sensing or quantum networking, and again, there are some incredible experts here today that you'll hear on the next panel talking more specifically about those areas, but these are areas that we should be really focusing on right now. And overall, collectively, the ecosystem, we should be really focusing on how do we put dollars to work on education and workforce development. Because we have a huge need in a couple of years from now for a trained workforce that's skilled around quantum that's going to be able to support the ecosystem.
Clearly, one of the things that is responded in Washington is a general sense of a threat to our country. Give me an idea with our adversaries, the threat not only to what you talked about with encryption, but just overall infrastructure.
I mean, think about knowledge base, right? Being able to have situational awareness of something far faster than your ally, than your adversary would have. When I look at the fact that we can process information quickly, that is going to help us in any sort of scenario that would play out against a potential enemy.
So are we ready?
We're trying.
Is our, I'll use the word enemies, are our enemies aware of where we stand versus where they stand?
I don't think anyone really knows where anyone stands, especially around quantum, because it's so hard to read between the lines of what some countries are saying versus others. But I've also met with other country leaders in the last year talking about how we also need a diversity of mindset around supply chain and around innovation, because one country might be really good at something where another country might be really good at another thing, and them putting those parts together is really important to advance quantum technology.
So when we look at what's going on in the United States, I find it interesting that Palm Beach and South Florida have become sort of this quantum coast, and I'm curious, is that hype, and what is it that makes this part of Florida so conducive to becoming something part of this quantum development?
I think we're naturally seeing a lot of businesses coming into South Florida in general, not just, in the ultra technology sector. When I look at the fact that Florida is incredibly aware of how to work with businesses, so very business friendly, there's a lot of incentives on coming into the state in general. But if you look around us, this is winter, and there's a lot of people from northern climates here today, and they're dabbing their face because it's a little warm outside, but it's beautiful weather in South Florida most of the year. And what I say to that is, because there's been such an influx of people coming into this region, it's almost only inevitable that some of the bright minds are going to come back. And I go back to even when I was born. The IBM PC came out the same year that I was born in the same city. So Boca Raton was where IBM had their headquarters and where they released the IBM PC. So this area is actually really ripe with innovation and technology.
Does that mean that when you look across the state and particularly this part of the state, that there is the university support, the connectiveness to make sure that all of those little pieces of the puzzle, so you can actually have somebody come out of a university having the skills as opposed to transplanting from Boston or Seattle?
Absolutely. It's more about how do we keep talent in our state, because traditionally they were going out to other states to get higher degrees of work or something that was more specific to their skill set. And we were very fortunate to work with the state about a month and a half ago on building an MOU where we aligned 15 of the top universities in Florida that were working on quantum technology, and they all signed an MOU and a degree that they are all now collaborating and coordinating on efforts together, whether it's sharing resources, knowledge base, teachers, and also capital. So it's not that every one of these universities is going to go out to the state or the federal government and say, hey, we need X amount of dollars for this machine, and they're all trying to get the same thing. They're all now working in collaboration so that more of that wealth and more of that knowledge base can be transferred amongst all of the universities within Florida.
And I think I know the answer to this question. How did that connection all sort of happen, where everybody decided to work together instead of competing?
Look, I think I had a little hand in some of that, but I would say it more so came down to the politicians. And I think more than anything, a willingness from the universities to get aligned and coordinated, because I would talk to one university about one thing and then another university about another, and then I'd tell them about what each of the universities was doing, and they were sort of blown away that they didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And so by creating more of a governing body, that's going to help really align the system within Florida. And I think that just naturally attracts more business and so on, and the flywheel goes.
So with Quantum Coast Capital, which you created here, what kinds of companies or capabilities are you looking for?
So we're predominantly right now looking to invest in the US. So we want to look at quantum technologies across the sector, even the picks and shovels or the supporting infrastructure for quantum. So it could be a cryogenics company that's going to build something that you could put a chip in and it cools a higher degree of faster, or it cools it more efficiently, if you will. So anything across the board is really where we're looking at investing in the future once we start investing. And when I look at the sort of overall aspect of a lot of these companies, I get excited because we're going to see a number of these businesses that will get absorbed most likely in the next couple of years by some of the bigger guys. Again, Niccolo is very famous for going out and acquiring companies at IonQ. I'm not saying that it would be a hundreds of millions of dollars play, but I think that if we're looking at companies that are relatively at a 5x in 2 years from now, that's a fairly good investment. I'm not saying that that'll happen, but I think that that's where we're seeing the landscape happening. I'm more excited about being patient on my capital and thinking far ahead into the future in the 8 to 10 year category, where we're going to start seeing unicorns sprout out in the quantum ecosystem.
So this is the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology. What sort of message do you hope that people, families, those who are hearing this kind of take away from that?
I think it's start early. One of the greatest things last week as I visited a high school and spoke to their physics class, and the students that were there were asking me questions that were way over my head. And I'm not a physicist by any means, but I definitely look at the fact that we need to start as young as possible in getting younger people excited about quantum.
So you're encouraged by that. Is the educational support from where you were there to encourage that development?
Yeah, and a lot of that really stems from, I believe, what UNESCO did as a great job around creating this movement for the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology. They've provided resources, they've provided tools, they've provided teaching kits to students where everyone can start really learning about quantum, and candidly, it comes at all levels. I think going back to your question even about the Senate or Congress, older generations, if you will, they don't understand how an iPhone works, potentially, or how to program it, I should say.
They don't even understand how Google works. We've seen that famous video.
Yes, but again, they're using some forms of these technologies every day, so it's not like they necessarily have to know how to program it. It's understanding the implications that it's going to have on society.
Do you think the word quantum is in part the problem, that it scares people, or
Sure.
it's a word that feels ill-defined?
Yeah, I mean, we've met with potential investors for the fund, and a lot of people will say, hey, I've never heard of quantum, or I don't even really know what this is, can't invest.
So I mentioned that I've known you since you were 19 years old, and you wandered in and wowed us all, although we didn't give you initially much credit until we kind of sat back and said, wow. Before, of course, I knew you, you were like a filmmaker, like a student filmmaker. Did you see this arc happening where you were shooting little films that have now led you to this world of quantum?
Yeah, I think I've always, again, been naturally gravitated towards technology. And
optimistically?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always saw in some technologies the good that could come out of it, or the efficiencies that could be made from using said technology. One of the first examples that I remember, this was the breaking point for me personally at NBC, was I was a contractor and obviously working for a number of years, and somebody very high up at NBC met with me one day because they genuinely wanted to learn. They were curious what my experience had been like, and the major thing that I told them was we should be putting video online. And this was probably about 2004.
And I kind of remember the reaction, which was?
We're the network. Why would anyone ever watch content online?
Eat those words, huh?
I pretty much that next day said, hey guys, I think I'm done working with the network. And I was 24 at that point and quitting the network.
Which I will say, all of us thought was nuts, because the term is golden handcuffs. Once you're in, you were in, and things have changed now, but it was a very profitable business that meant that it was very well paid.
And then a couple years later, I was knocking on every door imaginable to tell people, more importantly, businesses and agencies, we should put your company online. And we could stream video, and the technology was evolving. And then all of a sudden, this thing called YouTube came out. And my company massively blossomed from there. And we were working all around the world for some of the biggest brands in the world. And I think that candidly set me up for today.
Wow.
And one of the biggest things that I would say is embracing a lot of that technology, understanding it, and then also the communications around trying to tell people, hey, you should be streaming. You should, this is going to evolve and it's going to get better. I think that I've been doing that a lot now with quantum. And I've been going door to door, and I'm going to governments, and I'm going to states, and I'm going to other places where I'm trying to explain to people what is about to come up and unfold in front of us, and we can't be left behind.
Well, from a fearless 19-year-old who wandered into NBC to Quantum Coast Capital, thank you, Matt, and really enjoyed listening to what you had to say.
Thank you. Thank you all.